Our team consists of Jonathan Chan, Ian Klaas, Alex Mujinski, Andrzej Zanuni, and Kyle Podorek. For this unit, we were assigned to create a game with bad UX, and our game is called Jump Jam.
So we had to first define what a bad onboarding experience was, and using the lecture slides, or the lecture videos rather, we came up with two basic ideas that we built upon. So the first one is you should give context for the player, which means they should be able to learn by doing. And this was said by Celia Hodent. And what we basically did was just twist it, and instead of giving context for the player and then having them learn by doing, we gave no context and just threw them in the deep side of the water, I guess. And for the second part, we had the video by Extra Credits, where they talk about the design of everyday things, like this is so deeply ingrained in our cultures and societies. So this was basically talking about how arrow keys, or WASD, is used often, and with this we thought, why not switch it up and use different keys? So maybe even the numpad F keys, possibly enter, shift, space, stuff like that. And so one of the things we did want to incorporate was obviously confusing and frustrating the player. So off the fact that we gave them no context, this would be confusing and frustrating to them. Misuse of graphics. This is a different take on the context given. It, I guess, misdirected them. Pop-up ads to disrupt the player experience. This also just sort of took them out of the game and gave them something completely different. So basically it was the Raid Shadow Legends popping up in the middle of a level and just taking them out of the immersion they were just in. The hidden HUD, so the point system we did have in place is once you get up to a point, the level just completes, but the player doesn't know what's going on. Poor and delayed sounds, so we thought having loud sounds and possibly even jump sound, for example, being late by like around 2 seconds or so would make the experience a lot worse. We just know that some players do play on mute, so that would hinder it a little, but regardless. And then obviously controls never explained, or changing the controls. Like I said earlier, on the confusing and frustrating the player. This is the learning by doing thing, but given no context or different context, it would make it a less enjoyable experience.
So the general idea was to navigate obstacles by moving and jumping. What we actually did when creating the game was start off with the most basic platform game, and once it's playable and just a basic game, from there we start to slowly think of ideas to make the UX bad. So our goal was to complete the level, so make it very annoying, make it very difficult, but at the end of the day, it has to be playable at the end, and has to be a good experience for the player at some point. It's bad UX, but if it makes them quit halfway through the game every single time, then it's not going to be playable. So we wanted to use these bad UX to frustrate the player by using pop-ups, misleading obstacles. So pop-ups would be like the Raid Shadow Legends that Endra just said. The misleading obstacles would be, let's say, having a spike. Most people, when they're going through the level, they'll try to dodge the spikes the entire time, only to find out that what they were trying to get to was actually what killed them at the end. So kind of messing with what they would normally expect in a game. Controls, we normally think WASD or the arrow keys, especially since the tutorial, from doing the tutorial, you start to realize that the controls you had in the first level, by the time you get to another level, the controls completely change, and that kind of will frustrate the user. And like Endrit said earlier, the sound is very delayed. So as we're walking, if it's delayed, it starts to actually become annoying rather than just feeling realistic in a game. Having that 2 second delay will just kind of frustrate the user as they're playing.
All right, so here's a picture of the initial tutorial level we based many of the other levels on. As you can see, there's a easy to see prompt here with arrow keys to move, and the goal, I guess, is to get to the top. And this was the main basis we used for every other level, and this was the arrow keys. It made it pretty straightforward on how to pass the level. It was nothing crazy, but we used this just to make everything else, and like I said, just basic level.
So how the game was created, we used Construct 3. That was the main program that we actually built our maps on, connected them together, and were playing on, like testing. Pixel art was used just a little bit for actually using the items. So many of the items that are in the game was taken off and used from pixel art and exported into the Construct 3 to be added to the game. So each member created their own level, and these levels were all shared onto GitHub. And what was really cool is that since every person kind of went off and made their own game, when it came to testing time, we started to realize that everybody else's game had very nice ideas, and we were able to incorporate it and improve our own levels, making the game better. And so while we were making the game better and modifying it, we would do it every week after our group meetings. We would discuss, think of new ideas. Maybe one player plays another player's level and says, I really liked this about yours, but I don't like this. And that's kind of how we start to get feedback from the rest of the group. Each level was created as a basic level. So, like I said earlier, it's supposed to be a playable level, just very like, left to right from the map. You get to the flagpole. That's how I created one of the levels. And then slowly I started to change what happens when you get to the flagpole, what happens when you get on certain platforms. And so, little by little, the map went from one way to play it to a completely different experience. And our focus was maintaining 5 minutes of playability. We want to make sure that the player, as annoyed as he is still continuing to play the game for at least 5 minutes. And at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that the player reaches the end of the game without, some sort of rage quit or some sort of bug that just causes the game to be unplayable at a certain point. And peer feedback influence. So, what we gathered from the rest of the class was having a refined pop up system. So, instead of going to a certain, let's say you touch a sprite, like let's say an obstacle that you're supposed to jump on when it gets touched, the tab in Google Chrome now appears to have Raid Shadow Legends. That is as good as it is, not as good as if we had an actual pop up. And so when we heard that feedback, we started to realize that maybe actually having an in-game advertisement would look a lot better compared to sending you to another page. Adding more levels, we got to a point with the 5 minute issue where yes, we had some levels that were creative and the UX wasn't the best, but people got through the game very fast. We had a Zoom level where we just had problems with the zooming where the certain features when viewing the level, there was just issues with that, but we were able to fix it. Added sounds. Previously, we didn't have any sounds in the game, such as like the footsteps was actually an idea brought up by another student in the class. Adding the title page and also just fixing many problems and bugs, just like the wall. We didn't have walls on many of the levels, so if you were to jump off, you fall, and from there you don't respawn, and that became unplayable. So that was one of those bugs that people mentioned that really helped us modify the game.
So what we learned this time that we could probably fix for the next unit would be refining the brainstorming process. So we had some basic ideas as to how to do this, but we probably should have, we will be taking better notes on what we can and can't do. Having a better prototype to get feedback on. This time we were really crunched on time for a few of the members, but as long as we get more of the idea, so for example, we had more levels than we did, I guess, the bad onboarding. Like the professor said, he wanted more bad onboarding than actual gameplay for the prototype, and I think we missed the mark on that. But for next time, we'll focus mainly on what the goal should be. Starting earlier on And by that I mean probably like the day of the unit being assigned, we could probably just start mocking something up and then maybe give some time later on to fix it up. Meeting more regularly, um, obviously that's a big one as much as we can. We had a few days where we had planned, but there were, I guess, emergencies coming up, but we should plan around those either way. Using a different program. So for Construct 3, we were gated on some of like the layer stuff. Pop-ups were a bit of a problem considering you had to do layouts instead of the actual layers given. But maybe if we go back to Construct 2 or even Unity or something, it might be little easier. And broaden our horizons. By this we mean just have more people do different things as much as possible. We did have a few different. So, for example, I had the visual last time. This time I was helping out with the programming. Um, but some of us were stuck on the same stuff. So, I think Kyle was stuck on the audio side. So, for footsteps and any other audio device or audio sound that was in the game. So for next time, we want to make them either do like programming or visual stuff, anything of the sorts. But yeah.
Well, thank you for watching our presentation.